Standard labels are really important. If you take that job title that we saw a minute ago, if you have 5 different ways of describing the same job title, then you end up with no way to aggregate up to that job title because you aggregate up to the 5 job titles. So having standard labels gives you better grouping in reports. And it also allows a company to define that terminology at a corporate level. One of the things I find with my data customers is that English seems to be the hardest thing we have to deal with because we can all say one word and it means different things to different people. So defining that corporate terminology and making sure that everybody uses the same terminology, even though their source systems might not enforce it, that's what DQS does for us. It allows us to define those standards and map all of those non-standard labels into a corporate taxonomy. Another function in DQS that's really helpful is it can help identify duplicates. If I've spelled my name, so let's say, for example, I license Microsoft software, and I go and I register my Microsoft software, and one day I'm Kathy Vick, and the next day I forget and I'm Kathleen Vick. I've now just introduced myself twice into their system. But there are ways to identify those duplicates. If you have my address and my phone number, and you know that Kathy is a synonym for Kathleen, it becomes a lot easier to say, oh, look, that's really the same person. Another area where this is really common is identifying businesses. Trying to figure out business corporate structures and who owns what and what their names are supposed to be versus what they say their name is, that can be a big challenge in any environment. One of the features in DQS allows us to do what I just talked about, grab a set of attributes and say, okay, this combination of attributes together along with these synonyms will help me identify those duplicates and figure out that Kathy is really only in there once instead of twice. Another really valid DQS function that I like a lot is the ability to identify an outlier. So if I have a birth date field and my application doesn't put any controls over when the birth date is, somebody could easily put in 1859 instead of 1959. I'm pretty positive we don't have any people in the company that are 150 years old, so I can define a business rule that says if I have a birth date that's older than 1900, that's probably an outlier. Somebody's made a mistake and I don't want to bring that data into my analysis because it's going to screw up my analysis. So I either want to fix it, I want to patch it, or I want to redirect that to have someone look at that data. That's one of the nice things that we can do in DQS. Probably one of the strongest features is this concept of multiple field validations. So as an example, we know that Seattle is a valid name of a city, but Seattle, Oregon is not a valid city. So being able to take the valid city and a valid state and match up valid cities to valid states and do the validation across those 2 columns, that's a really powerful feature of DQS. And where this really comes in handy is when you're doing things like, I just worked with a medical company, and being able to join the values that describe procedures with a higher level of categorization of those procedures is really important. So you want to make sure that certain surgeries fall into orthopedics and other surgeries fall into pediatrics. Being able to define those rules and allow validation so that we don't have a back surgery coming in under pediatrics, that's really important to them. So being able to do multiple field validations is one of the strong features in DQS. The biggest reason I like it is it lets business people define business definitions. So as I said a minute ago, we've always done data cleansing efforts, but many times that involves bringing the IT people in and having them write code. With DQS, we have an application that allows us to get business people in doing it because they know the data much better. DQS uses the concept of a knowledge base. A knowledge base is an actual database in SQL Server that contains the data that we need in order to cleanse and deduplicate the data that we want to bring into our system. What's nice about it is that through the application, through the learning process, it can be taught about data, and it's used to help maintain integrity. So as an example, data, we can look at data coming in, and if somebody put in Florida and forgot the A, we can assign that and say, yeah, that really means Florida. One of the most popular uses or examples of this I can give is New York City. A lot of people type New York City when we know the real name of the city is New York. And being able to map New York City to New York is a very helpful feature because, again, I don't want to introduce New York City as a new city into my system, but I know people are going to type in New York City as a search, as an address. So I can teach the data and say, okay, every time you see New York City, I want you to put in New York. DQS operates with this concept of domains. And in DQS, a domain is a list of valid values and business rules that define a specific field. So if I have zip codes, it's probably a business rule that says I have either 5 or 9 digits,